Okay, so next up, before our coffee break, Alex Bloor is going to come and speak to us about what it's like being a board director at LINX. We've got another election coming up in May, so we thought instead of us telling you what it's like to be a board member, it'd be nice to have an actual board member tell you about the process and what it's like. So Alex, over to you.
Yes, there's a microphone here. I told several members of the executive that I would start with a karaoke number. And as yet, they don't know I was joking. For the benefit of everyone, I was. But I will tell you a bit about myself. So I've been involved in the internet industry since the very late 90s. Some of you might remember me from the UK Not mailing list in the early noughties. And then I joined Andrews and Arnold in 2012, becoming general manager. I guess that's where most of you possibly know me from. Cut forward to 2020, 2021, and I saw what happened with Nominet. And I wondered, is there anything I can do to try and help with that? But around that time, there was a team of people who sort of had picked up the mantle for that and had got it in hand pretty well and started to put things in the right direction. But also around that time, LINX was looking for non-exec board members. And so I stood for election to LINX, very much with the same idea, except that I had no worries at all about what was going on at LINX. I wasn't critical of it at all, but I suppose I thought, perhaps I can help keep it going in the right direction. So a little bit on what is an NED. We throw these terms around. We say NED or non-exec. Obviously, it's a non-executive director. A director meaning an officer of the company, a legal title, and non-executive meaning essentially not operational. The non-execs are not in any sense running the network or planning the network or managing staff directly. A non-exec, even a non-exec, any director, but a non-exec has a legal and a fiduciary responsibility. We're, for example, required to make sure that the accounts get published and also act under the Companies Act 2006 in various ways that are quite, they're legally important. I guess to summarize really that we're there to support and also to challenge the executive to sort of act as a sanity, a kind of a sanity measure really. You might wonder what's needed to be a non-exec, because hopefully some people in this room will be thinking about that, and I'm sure some of you have got some ideas. Higher education, prior board experience, a qualification maybe that's relevant, and a big idea and unbreakable self-assurance are all things you do not need. They may be helpful. I've even added a thing for this. Some of them may be helpful, but they are not things that are mandatory requirements for being a board member. So what actually is needed? In my opinion, I think some management experience in the industry is a good starting point. Being willing to put in the time and the work to read the papers, attend the meetings, and so on. To have a genuine interest in the future of LINX and to a point, the future of the industry. And the ability to listen and debate and question and even compromise, but without really falling out, to coin a phrase, to be able to disagree agreeably. So those are all things that I think are important. So what's a typical board meeting like? Well, it's somewhat formal, not oppressively so, but an agenda is followed, which is sent out some time before, and minutes are taken. The chair leads the meeting, that's Peter Knuck, and there are some regular items, reports from subcommittees, finance, risk and security, governance and remuneration, and some discussion at the beginning about health and safety, if there have been any issues of that crop up, that sort of thing. And then we get on to the agenda items, the sort of the big topics of the meeting. And there's usually been, or always been, a pack of information sent out to read before the board meeting. And those could be financial, something to do with pricing maybe, risks on the horizon, new ventures perhaps in other countries. And then once we've talked about all those, the meeting is closed. Now, if anyone's had involvement with, I don't know, a PTA or a town council, I think you might have, or you've watched a particular TV program from the 90s, you may have an idea about how a board meeting goes. And I can really only address that in the following way. So some of you get the joke. Excellent. I want to be clear about this. There is some protocol, right? There is a structure and a format that the meeting takes, but it is not turning the handle for its own sake. The structure and the protocol that is followed is minimal, not oppressive, and helpful to the process of the meeting and making sure that we get things done. So it's not an unpleasant experience. I thought I'd quickly rattle through some of the things that we have talked about in recent meetings. I've been at NED now for coming up to 3 years, and so I've sort of picked a few topics that we've talked about during that whole time. A little note here, I'd originally made that first bullet point network upgrades. I just called it network upgrades. We don't actually design the network in the board. That's Richard and his team's job. So that is not really discussed. But when Richard needs to make some expenditure, then that is something that is brought to the board and discussed over a certain limit. We also look at the annual accounts. The NEDs, have a session even with the auditors out with the executive team so that we can discuss with them any concerns we might have. And so the accounts are a big topic, and that takes up quite a bit of time every year. And then a couple of more exceptional items. Obviously, we have hired a new CFO. So in the finance, risk and security team and in the board as well, we have had quite a lot of conversation about those, attended interviews and so on. And finally, you'll all be aware of the Nairobi opportunity that's going ahead now, it's built. That took up quite a bit of board time as well. So it's quite a varied series of topics that are discussed. It keeps you interested, I think, is how I would put that. There is a fairly meaningful time commitment of being an NED, and I was actually quite surprised to look back at my LINX diary and see that I think I had had involvement in some LINX business, and that could be half an hour on a Zoom call or an entire day, and a mix of all of those and everything in between, on 29 individual days in 2023. Now, I do want to say that represents vastly less than 29 days of person hours, but just to kind of give the balance really there, that on 29 individual days, I did something connected with LINX, and that would have been either a Zoom meeting or something in person. I rattled through and said, 8 to 10 board meetings, a couple of strategy days. Those are full days, of course. Some open strategy sessions. I've also included LINX events, such as this one. So again, you might, depending on how you arranged it with your employer, you might include or exclude those. CFO interviews, which are a bit more exceptional, and as a guest at the senior management team meetings. So hopefully that gives you an idea that there is some disruption to your life by being a LINX NED, but it's not, again, it's not a huge problem, and the length of time involved varies quite a bit. And of course, I don't want to miss this out, reading the board papers is an exercise in its own right and takes time. You can fit that in any time, do it at weekends and evenings, but it's not nothing. So I thought I'd cover what I think LINX gains from having some NEDs on the board. And broadly, I would say, yeah, wider experience, wider opinions, diversity of backgrounds and so on. A bit of a check and a balance. I've already kind of said a sanity check. I think that by having non-execs who are mostly associated with members of LINX, the members' voices are represented better in the boardroom than otherwise. And actually flipping it the other way around, I've certainly been asked at other industry events, you know, can you explain, I don't know, what the thought process behind Nairobi was or something, once all the dust had settled and that was all approved. And so I think the board, the non-execs act as something of an ambassador to the rest of the board and the decisions that are made. And slightly, kind of connectedly, there's a diffusion of responsibility for decisions made. It doesn't entirely all rest on the executive. There have been people from the membership involved in those decisions, those important decisions. So hopefully that's what LINX gets out of having us lot. What do we get out of it? Well, I think I get a wider view of the industry. You guys know I work for Andrews & Arnold, a fairly small internet service provider. I definitely see a wider view on the industry by being a non-exec of LINX. Obviously, we also get input into important decisions that affect us all. I think there's some useful and transferable knowledge, experience, and skills gained from being on a board like this. And if you already have board experience, then LINX being a sort of cooperative membership model will be different from, let's say, a PLC. So there could be a benefit there. And finally, and not to be coy about it, there is a stipend. So this is really an appeal. We would like people to stand in May. So if you are interested in doing that, and you're not too offended by my terrible Photoshop skills, please talk to, I guess, maybe Peter or Curtis or me. I'm around all day today and tomorrow, so please talk to me about it, or one of us. And finally, I'm standing again in May. I should add, that's a very old picture, right? It wasn't taken for this. I just found it in my library. I am standing again in May. I think I've done more good than harm over the last nearly three years. I'd like to be given the opportunity, with your blessing, to do more good than harm for another 3 years. So please, I mean, it's actually not a cross, is it? It's a 1, but you get the idea. If you could, I'd be very grateful for your votes. So I think that's it. Any questions?
Yep, Pete.
Oh, that's not fair.
Yeah, no, just a point of order, and this is probably one really for Neil as the governance committee. I think someone has to nominate you before you can stand.
Well, Andrews & Arnold will be nominating me. I'll make sure of that.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, it's Mike Blanche. I'm on the board, but I'm retiring in May after 9 years. So there will be one vacancy at least on the board, even with Alex standing for re-election. Thank you, Alex, for a very interesting presentation.
Thanks, Mike.
I mean, if there are questions that you don't want to ask out loud, then just come and talk to me, or now there are more.
Hi, Alex, Thomas. As ex-board member, what's caring and what pain are you going to carry for the next 3 years?
Sorry, I didn't.
What I'm going to ask is, you say all the nice things about the board. What are the negatives?
What are the negatives? That's a really good question. I think, would I? That's a really good question. I do have an answer for it. I think one of the things that my opinion has been changed most about, I very much was I remember when LINX went to North Virginia and launched Nova, and I remember I was definitely one of those people in the group who, I mean, to be clear, I wasn't being nasty about it, but I definitely said, I remember myself saying, what does the L in LINX even stand for anymore, right? And I think that possibly one of the more frustrating things, it's not something that keeps me awake at night, but is that I think in order to retain the good aspects of LINX as it is today, we can't sit on our hands and aim for the horizon, right? We can't do that. You have to pitch up a bit to try and make sure that you carry on doing the things that many people like about LINX. You sort of have to broaden it a bit, and that can, perhaps to some members, that may look like mission creep, but where in fact the aim of the game is to keep doing all the things that we do well and stay doing that. But like, and I think that from my perspective as board member, I think we, you know, maybe we could communicate that better, or maybe that's, I think that not being commonly known would be a slight frustration. But overall, I would say the experience of being on the board is positive and enjoyable, actually. And it's, you know, a great bunch of people, right? So yeah, does that answer the question, or did I sidestep it massively? Excellent.
Neil, did you have?
Actually, I just wanted to say.
So not fair.
Well, first of all, yeah, Alex has been great. Actually, I wanted to say something about Mike, because you said you were standing down. I can't ignore that. I just want everyone to recognise Mike has been an absolutely outstanding board member for this organisation. He's committed, he's reliable, he's been superb. I will miss him, and I think the rest of the board will also miss him. And I think everyone should just give Mike a round of applause.
Yep.
It's been awesome.